just give us the lay of the land for the Oklahoma fan, Ryan, that's going to see a different football team next week.
Well, hey, what's up, Jay? Good to see you, man. Happy holidays to everybody out there. Yeah, the Ducks are in some serious transition. We all know this. Both these teams are, it feels like. There's kids going to the transfer portal. There's kids declaring to the NFL. Starters are leaving this program for both of those. And so, yeah, you on paper, it looks a little younger than we thought we were going to see just a couple weeks ago. But I think it's going to be a great game. I think both these teams have incredible recruiting and incredible depth. Have shown this year with the amount of injuries Oregon's had. And I think they're going to be putting themselves in a really good position. I think both these teams want to end the year with a win. They've ended the season so poorly. Both these teams had high expectations, and now we find ourselves in the Alamo Bowl. In any other given year, it feels like the Alamo Bowl is a great bowl. This matchup, any other year, feels like it's a great matchup. I mean, this could be a CFP matchup. It just feels like this year for both these teams, it's a little bit of a downer coming from where the highs that you were in just a month or so ago. To where you're at right now. But I do think Oregon's got a good shot in this one. It's all about if they can score points on offense. I think Oklahoma's going to score on Oregon. It's just whether or not Oregon can score on Oklahoma.
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, I just echo a lot of that from the Oklahoma side as well. To your point, it's a little bit of a disappointing ending to where both of these teams thought that they would be. I mean, particularly from the Oklahoma side. I mean, a lot of people thought this could be the best Oklahoma team that they've had in 10, 12 years, and it really just didn't manifest itself on the field, whether that be, Riley had one foot out the door, halfway through the year, whatever it might have been, they just weren't as productive. I think on the offensive line was a bit of a, one of the biggest disappointments overall in this team, just really not at the level that they've been over the last few years. And I think, one thing that you mentioned, a lot of kids either opting out or hitting the transfer portal. Oklahoma's got 4 players on defense that have opted out, in terms of early entrances into the NFL. They've got 3 or 4 on the offensive side that have hit the transfer portal. Jaden Hazelwood's probably the biggest name, has moved on to Arkansas already. Spencer Rattler and Austin Stogner from a backup quarterback, and then the starting tight end perspective have moved on to South Carolina. So yeah, it's a little bit of a just to see some of these younger kids see what they can do and see their level of preparedness and level of just readiness to go. And I think one thing, it's always me and Mark were talking, it's always interesting the mindset coming into these bowl games. Do teams like how much do they really care about being there? I mean, exactly to your point, when expectations were maybe higher, whether it be Sugar Bowl, Rose Bowl for the Oregon side or a CFP game. So I think the mindset, especially with an interim coach on both sides of this, is very intriguing as much as anything in terms of that matchup. And Oklahoma's got obviously Bob Stoops coming back to coach this game, and then they've got some they've got some coordinators who typically don't coordinate. Brian Odom's coming back for Oklahoma to call the plays and to be the defensive coordinator in this game, and then he'll go back to USC afterwards. So it's an interesting dynamic that you don't see a whole lot. So I'm really looking forward to the game, and I think it'll be a great one.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're dealing with this very similar situation where you had basically when Cristobal left, Rob Mullins, the AD, had a conversation with the entire staff and basically said, okay, nobody's leaving. You guys are going to have to stay here throughout the bowl game. These guys want their money as well, right? All those extra little stipulations in the contract are if you coach the bowl game, right? So I think there's incentive to be there. I was pretty impressed though, because this staff had a lot of guys leave. I mean, Ken Wilson, linebacker coach, become the Nevada coach. Offensive coordinator Joe Moorhead takes the Akron job. Tim DeRuyter is going to Texas Tech to be the defensive coordinator. And all these guys are on staff right now, staying in Eugene, coaching out throughout this whole thing. Mara's the only guy that left. So I think it's going to be an interesting thing going forward to see exactly what you get with this team. I do think you're going to see a team that once they put the helmets on, once they put the pads on, kids are going to get fired up and ready to play. Maybe 2 weeks out, maybe there's a little bit of a malaise hanging over both these programs. But I think once the ball gets kicked off and everything gets strapped up, I think it'll be a pretty exciting game.
You would think so. The Alamo Bowl's always a highly rated game on television. It's always a top 7 or 8 rated bowl game, something in that range. And as I make the comment all the time when bowl games get disparaged to a certain extent, hey, it's the only game in town on that particular date and time, and College Football Nation is going to be watching. People love to watch bowl games during the holidays. So, hey, if you don't want to, either one of these teams or programs can look back upon a number of situations, but most closely connected to Oklahoma would be the Cotton Bowl situation with Florida. And that is just a bad look. It's one thing when a North Carolina goes to the Orange Bowl last year without 2,000-yard rushers, its top 2 receivers, its best defensive player, and Mac Brown still prepares the team, doesn't whine and complain about it, says we're going to prepare for a football game and give it our best, and they gave it a great shot. They still lost, but they played a top 5 team, Texas A&M, down to the last couple minutes. Mm-hmm. Great showing on a big stage, versus you contrast that with Dan Mullen basically bailing on his team, kind of disconnecting himself from his team and saying, well, that's really not our football team. And then it just showed on the field, the attitude and the personnel groupings and all of it. And then it just becomes a bad look on a major stage. And for Florida football, it became something that added on to the stockpile of Dan Mullen issues that carried it through the offseason, because it's obviously the last impression, and it's a big one on a big stage, regardless of people putting an exhibition type tag on it. It's watched by a lot of people, and it added on to the Florida football environment from a negative standpoint. And we see where we are a year later there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry to jump in there, Jay. I think this is a huge game for both these teams going into next year. I think Oklahoma and Oregon both see this as a real springboard for that next year's season. What would you think, Jay?
No, absolutely agree. And I think a lot of people think that these games are meaningless, and I definitely disagree. I mean, I think with the opt-outs, it's kind of taken a little bit of a luster off some of these games that we've seen over the last few years. But no, I mean, to Mark's point, the winner of these games can give them a big bump in the next year. And I think let's not undervalue the fact that the additional practices that these kids get, specifically the younger kids that maybe didn't necessarily have a great opportunity to get in the 2 deep or 3 deep or see a lot of playing time, that now will get just a valuable just these valuable practices and valuable game time coming into the season. And it's not always, it could be a bad trajectory, to Mark's point, exactly what happened with Florida. It started bad with this Cotton Bowl last year, and then it ended even worse for that Florida team this year. So yeah, I think this could be a good springboard for both of these teams coming into 2022, which may not necessarily have the same optimistic outlook that they had the beginning of this year. So I think it gives them a good springboard into next year and seeing exactly what both of these programs could be in 2022.
So looking at the glass half full instead of half empty for all the stars and impact players that we will not see if you're projecting toward 2022. So I play the college football nerd and geek here, because I want to know personnel. I want to know who's next, what the next wave looks like for those 2 teams that I'm watching right there. And if Kayvon Thibodeau's not there, that means somebody else is grabbing up all those reps. And that's most likely somebody who's going to be impactful possibly to next season. So, Ryan, are those, who would be that collection of players, any handful of players that you're looking at thinking, hey, I know a little bit about this guy, or maybe he's played quite a bit, but he needs to make an even greater impact in 22?
Oh, I totally think so. The defensive side had so many injuries this year. I mean, just to think that they had these 3 really highly recruited defensive players in the last couple of years. Kayvon Thibodeau, number 1 player in the country. Justin Flo, number 1 linebacker on the West Coast. Mace Funa, Noah Sewell, all these guys really, really, really highly recruited. And they only got 1/2 of football all last year with them. I mean, the injuries hit this team very hard. And so immediately you saw guys jump in their place. You saw younger guys come up. So Braden Swinson's the big one, number 44 off the end. Brandon Dorless, number 3, has had a huge year this year in the middle, defensive tackle. Mace Funa has come back off injury, but all these guys were then also injured throughout the year as well. So, I mean, it was just a collective group effort this year. Obviously, KT jumped off the film because of his this stature, speed, size. It's very rare you get a combination like that. But even he was not necessarily dominant in games. There were a lot of times where he was used almost as a decoy on the defense. They double teamed him. They went to the other side. So really everybody else had to step up on this defense. So there is going to be some guys in the middle who are going to be really good to look forward to. Noah Sewell, I think, is one of the better linebackers in the country. He's going forward. He's going to be an absolute stud. That whole family are all awesome. Every single one of the brothers is D1 football. The brother, obviously, Penne, who's the most famous on our section, is now with the Lions and playing very well on the right side of that line, even though that Lions team is not that good. But I do think that Noah Sewell is going to be the next guy next year. I think he's going to be the guy. And then I think they get Justin Flew off the injury next year. You can be able to pair those guys up if they stay healthy. But this year is going to be kind of an interesting one because we've still got a one guy, Verone McKinley, who was a finalist for the Thorpe Award, a very, very good player, had 6 interceptions this year, and we still don't really know what he's going to do with the NFL or not. You know, he has a possibility of maybe opting out to go to the NFL, but he hasn't said that yet. A guy from Texas probably wants to go back to the Alamo Bowl, play well, and maybe make that decision after the Alamo Bowl, but he would be a great one as well to watch out for. He's number 23.
Jason, anyone on the Oklahoma side that you're interested in seeing a little bit more of?
Yeah, I think so. I'd mentioned that Oklahoma's going to have 4 guys that had opted out early, to the NFL. That are not going to be playing on this game. A couple of guys from the defensive line and a couple of guys from the linebacker group. So, Perion Winfrey and Isaiah Thomas are both from a defensive tackle perspective and then kind of a defensive end. So Reggie Grimes is a guy that's been really not played a whole lot. They'll get a good opportunity this year. He's probably the wave of the future in terms of the next best pass rusher on the end for Oklahoma. So I think that's a guy to look out for, not only necessarily in this game, but then moving forward. Brian Asamoah from the linebacker position, as well as Nick Benito. Nick Benito was one of the best pass rushers in the country, certainly one of the best on this Oklahoma team. So I think his production is probably going to be missed, probably more than the others. So I would at least not among the defensive line. So I would anticipate Marcus Stripling, who again, a lot of these guys were high volume snap takers, I guess is the best word to describe it. So not a lot of experience out of Reggie Grimes and then Marcus Stripling, but those are guys that, Stripling had moved over to the position from the defensive line to be kind of that jack linebacker spot for Benito this year. So he'll get the start and he'll get some playing time. And then, Brian Asamoah was probably Oklahoma's best linebacker this year. Certainly the best tackler in open field.
Oh, yeah. And I just to jump in real quick. Yeah, I was talking with some guys the other night. They said basically that on the starting Oklahoma defense, anybody with over 20 or 30 tackles feels like they're almost drafted into the NFL at this point. And I know that's going to be a huge hit for them. Oregon maybe could be able to run the ball against them a little bit. We don't know. But yeah, these are 2 teams that are now, with the amount of talent they have on their roster, the future is going to this is going to happen. This is the future, obviously. If you don't get to that top end bowl, most of those guys are not going to play. They're all going to opt out.
Yeah, and I think that's why, for me, it was pretty refreshing to see Matt Corral's commentary about, about playing in their bowl game. He had mentioned, he felt like his team, believed in him, and he didn't even think twice about it. He's a guy that's probably going to be one of the first couple of quarterbacks taken in the draft this year at the quarterback position, and he talked about how much he felt like it would be owed. Not only to that team, but the coaching staff, the organization, just in general. So, I think that's a fresh look at it, that we really don't see that too much in a guy that's probably, I don't know, Marky, maybe you follow it more than I do, but just, definitely one of the top quarterbacks in this upcoming draft.
Absolutely.